Hey everybody, Larry Powell here, your host for Studio HFL, and here a guest tonight is Gary Grant. But before we get to Gary, just thank you for all your support on all the previous interviews, and there's a great lineup here in March with some live interviews. Started with Yari Villanueva a couple of weeks ago. Of course, we got Gary tonight, Ashley Hall coming up, Al Ches, some other really terrific names. And you can, of course, check the Studio HFL webpage for the exact lineup, times, dates, and all that sort of thing. I would like to thank all the sponsors, of course, Pickett Brass, Eastman Winds, Carl Hammond Design, Messina Covers, S.E. Shires, Chop Saver, and Austin Custom Brass. Is that enough? That's enough, right? That's enough. But great support from them, and of course from my Patreon patrons. If you would like to become a Patreon patron, you can go to patreon.com/studiohfl and check out the ways you can support there. All right, so that was it. We got to get the business out of the way, and now for some fun.
Yeah,
Welcome, Gary Grant. This is a treat to get to talk to you. Welcome.
thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Larry.
So, yours is one of those names that I grew up with. It was like, you heard the name Malcolm McNabb, you heard Jerry Hay, you heard Gary Grant, you heard all these names, and just kind of maybe off on a pedestal. It's like the Greek gods somewhere off in the clouds, sitting there creating all this great trumpet music. Um, but here you are, and you said you're sitting in your backyard. You're in California now, is that right?
That's correct. I'm over in the Palm Springs area.
Hmm.
I've lived over. I bought this home in 2005,
Hmm.
and it was a second home. And so in 2016, I moved here
Hmm.
permanently and gave my home in Los Angeles to my daughter.
But your accent is not a West Coast accent.
No, I'm
No.
originally from Florida.
Well, I wouldn't have put you in Florida either. I thought you were in my neck of the woods, kind of in the Midwest.
Uh, Well,
Yeah.
I've never been accused of that. I've been accused of Texas.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, a little further south. So,
hey, listen,
um,
wherever we are is God's country.
oh, that's right. Although right now here in Indiana, it's wet, and it's been wet all day long. So, okay, so transplanted from Florida to California. Of course, recording studios probably brought you out that way. Um, but you know what? Let's back up. I want to talk first about what's going on today. What's keeping you busy these days? Projects and such.
Um, I'm busy recording a record that features me. That I'm the artist, and I'm in partnership with a gentleman by the name of Pat Vitas from Vero Beach, Florida, in that area. And I've recorded 11 tunes so far, and and uh, got some really nice stuff. Very musical. I'm very happy with it. It's a different. Um, it's it's the kind of music that is. It's it's not wave. It's not jazz. It does have jazz. Does have, you could consider melodies wave if you like.
Hmm.
It's classical. It's got bop in it. It's got, so the categories is what I want to do because I grew up as a doing versatile music and recording versatile music
Hmm.
as a musician for 45, 50 years in Los Angeles. And to be happy doing that, you must love all kind of music and have a open perspective to all kinds of music. And I found early on that the most important thing was the musicians that you played with was a real joy for me. And, I mean, granted, you can only do so many long tones and on the M11, but man, it was a kick to play in 90-piece orchestras and play first trumpet with those big orchestras, and to be with people from the LA Philharmonic and be with, that genre of people like Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
Marvelous, marvelous. What fun, man! And so I'm recording a record that emulates what I want to do. I'm not worried about the world. I'm not worried about a category. I'm should say I'm not concerned with the category of
Mm-hmm.
music, and it's like I said, it's like what I want to do, so I'm happy with it.
Are these your compositions, your arrangements?
They are partially my arrangements, but they are Pat Vitas's compositions,
Mm-hmm.
and then I take it from there.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's a partnership. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guy to work with. Doesn't ever tell me nothing except, boy, that sounds great. So when you're with somebody like that, it's really, really good. That I have open expression and we have a common goal, and
Mm-hmm.
that's hard to find. And
Mm-hmm.
and especially when you get involved in records and stuff, there's so many uh, avenues that people tell you what they want you to do to make the record sales. And this is my third record. I've never made money on records, ever, and my own personal records.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I broke even, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, I haven't really made any money like the big artists do and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that wheel doesn't usually turn for the arts, as you well know.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said a minute ago about being able to embrace all types of music, all kinds of music. And I think that's really relevant today, especially in the orchestra world, as we are, well, we're not quite post pandemic, but as orchestras and other performing arts organizations have to do something different, right? They've had to pivot. They've had to find new ways to keep their audience or grow their audience. And one of those ways, of course, is including more pops programming. And of course, now pops is so broad, right? I mean, it's everything from rap to country to playing the movie score. Um, there's a lot of hesitation, a lot of resistance from our colleagues. I don't know if you see that out there, but that's something that I see, um, and I understand it. Right? I mean, we've all trained to play the Mahler symphonies and the Beethoven symphonies. Um, but can you talk a little bit more about that? About how maybe you came to that perspective of embracing the different styles?
It's always been here, Larry. Uh, for example, in 2001, uh, 2002, Sergei Nikitaikov came and stayed with me for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that the issues, because he does the Mendelssohn, he does cello pieces, bassoon pieces, violin pieces, because the repertoire for the trumpet isn't extensive enough for new material.
Mm-hmm.
And he said then, and he met with people with the LA Philharmonic, and then you've got your purists involved in there that only want to hear a violin play a violin piece, not a trumpet player. And they think it's a sacrilege. So I can understand that, and I do understand it, but it certainly, uh, and the orchestras have changed, have given in to that somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
but he would not. He found a lot of resistance in a lot of American orchestras that wouldn't accept, uh, him doing the pieces he did. And I think just been here for a while, I can understand that, but it is as good as it is to keep the masters going. I mean, God love them, but uh, you know, the thing about rules is that they need to be broken.
Hmm.
They truly do, and there's so many beautiful musicians in this world. Let's don't limit that performance and that joy of listening to them perform uh, by saying an ironclad rule that we can't have that. So I just think it's been around a while, and
Mm-hmm.
and I started producing because to be an entrepreneur in the music world and not just be a studio sausage. A studio sausage is a guy that just comes in and takes his horn out and warms up and warms his fouls and plays exactly what he's supposed to play and dazzles hopefully the composer and packs up and goes home and has a practices or does whatever those things, and that's it. And I was always more interested in what was happening and on the other side of the glass as opposed to just as a performer. And it interested me what the frequencies were for different instruments. What were the best mics to use for the different instruments? The mic pre's that correlate with those microphones in capturing the best sound you can capture on somebody. And and all the I could go into a studio and there'd be an SSL board there, and the engineer could record me, but I could switch, and he couldn't switch. He can come out and play the trumpet, you know. And I learned a lot of that stuff with Jerry Hay
Mm-hmm.
and doing those horns and as much as we went on tour with Quincy, we went on tour with Stevie Wonder, and we did I did big band stuff, and I was with Woody Herman for a couple of years, and it just um, went on tour with the Honolulu Symphony and did different genres of music in the live world. Usually, when the Jerry Hay Horns performed, everybody associated with the record label, people associated with the artist, the studio would be jammed with people in the booth to come watch us lay this thing down because it was going to go down blistering, and and they would just be amazed at that. So that was sort of the live feedback that we got as players. You know what I mean? Even though it was going to tape and then we could stop and we could punch in if we had to,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the last 15, 20 years. But the 30 years before that was 2-inch tape, and wasn't a whole lot of that going on. So it was different time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really an experience of that live vibe that you get from the feedback as a performer. Plus, you didn't have to get on a bus or a plane, and to go do that, So, uh, but I found that being uh, versatile is what I like to do. I love country music. Uh, I do. I love, and I'm not going to prefix any of it with well, it's got to be this kind of country music. It can't be. No, I love country music. I love all music that is well done.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a dyad or a triad with a couple of guys, hopefully more, then and you get those harmonics in tune when you're playing and phrasing and listening to each other and
Mm-hmm.
balancing, that's music. There's no two ifs and ways about it. A lot of the legitimate repertoire, the classical repertoire, is learned throughout your whole life of playing Mahler and playing a, a, how to perform
Mm-hmm.
that kind of sound and depth. And man, it's valid. It's really extremely
Mm-hmm.
valid. But uh, then you there was taking that and going into a situation where it's not learned, the music's not learned, and you have to sight read and make it sound like you've played it all your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's a challenge.
So,
It's a serious challenge. It separates the men from the boys.
well, okay. So two things here. One is all your experience in a recording studio, and then all your experience performing live, talking about touring with Quincy and Woody Herman and such. I mean, of course, you enjoy both, uh, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the live, but the do you do much live performance these days? No.
No.
Do you
Um,
miss it?
no. Heavens no.
Really?
Not at all. Um, you know, uh, I mean, hey, I might sometime. I've got it in my mind to maybe go out to. They got some jazz clubs here in the Coachella Valley, and some pretty good players. You know, just go in and sit in and play a standard tune or two, and sort of get that out of my system. But I really, especially since the pandemic hit and all that stuff we went through, that mess, I was very, very comfortable in recording at home through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it ruined a lot of guys. I had calls in Los Angeles they were going to do a remake of Staying Alive, the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I did the original. So that's how old I am.
Wait a minute. Let me do the math on here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's about 40,
Yeah.
43 years ago,
Yeah.
and they wanted to use many of the original people they could, and wasn't that many of us alive. And I just before we even talked about the times, I think about 3 or 4 days of it,
Mm-hmm.
I just said no, no, thank you, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, I did it so much, I really don't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think guys, when they get up to my age, Larry, the biggest thing is they miss the camaraderie with the other musicians,
Mm-hmm.
and especially because I was producing Wayne Bergeron's big band and producing Arturo and of course Malcolm and
Mm-hmm.
just just a whole array of people that uh, you miss that moments,
Mm-hmm.
the moments of the music,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to capture that. Uh,
So, with the live performance versus recording studio, not the producing aspect, but the performance aspect, did you think there was more risk in live performance, or more risk uh, before you could actually do punches? But was there more risk when you were recording to tape? Am I? I don't know if I'm. It's like, did you feel like there was, or maybe pressure? Maybe risk isn't the thing, but did you feel like,
only if only if you were doing a direct to disc.
hmm,
A direct to disc recordings with Doug Sachs, he started that, but where you would do the whole album on one side without stopping. And, there wasn't any stopping, period. It was all done live, and it was done like state of the art performance.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a big clam,
It's there
okay,
forever.
are you going to start over again?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you can hear the because I did a few of those, and it wasn't for me, but from somebody else, and and the strings went, oh man, no. So in that sense, and the money wasn't any better. The stress was a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
and the concentration wasn't. I don't think it was different. It was we were always trying our best.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's a lot of stuff we recorded with Jerry that we'd go in, and the first time that we recorded something, we went straight down just so the producer could hear, and the artist could hear the arrangement
Mm-hmm.
and how it fit in the tune and get a gist of what was going on. So, like some of the tunes had longer vamps than they had was the tune. So, so it would that could be very manly, and you didn't really worry about any you know crashes or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
you just
Mm-hmm.
kept going and got them through it. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, we were really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
The orchestras were so good that they would be just playing, looked like spaghetti music on their music, and they would perform it. It sounded like a recording to me. I
Yeah.
mean, Lord of mercy, it was good. And
Mm-hmm.
they came from all over the world. So the stress the stress on the tape versus um, the computer is um, yeah there's a lot with that technology.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
music became a little bit more absurd, and the what people would demand of you and write for you. And there
Mm-hmm.
was still times without the tape too, but there's a lot of that with uh, composer wanting to put his signature in there, and it was really pretty much impossible to play.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it many, many times. All those instances were done uh, time after time, and we would So,
How
but
many of
but
those? How many of those were first take? Right, where you nailed it, and you just all right, let's move on. Next one. I mean, were there a lot of instances where that happened?
Well, there's so many instances. I mean, so many different angles about that. We might have just nailed it first time down, and the engineer comes back. Okay, I got a balance,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Or I
that
forgot to
always
push record. Right. Yeah.
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 Uh, that comes into play, and then yeah, there was. Jerry and I were doing a record, and Bill Reichenbach, Eastman School
Mm-hmm.
of Music,
Mm-hmm.
marvelous musician.
Yeah.
There's a good example. That's a pal of mine that I showed it up with for 40 years.
Mm.
Boy, is he a good musician. Bill Reichenbach. Yes, sir.
I think
And
Vinny DiMartino told me about him. Are they
he
kind of
did.
in the same? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They're the same age, practically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're same genre. I don't know if I think he was there when Bill was at Eastman. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
Vinny
So
was
you
there.
keep mentioning this guy named Jerry.
Oh,
It's not.
Jerry. Hey, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. I know. No, no. I know who it is. I was trying to be funny about that. I was going to say it's Jerry Lewis. No, it wasn't Jerry Lewis for sure. Um, tell me. Uh, although, did you ever work with Jerry Lewis? Did you ever play any of the telethons or anything like that?
I never did. Rick Baptist mostly did that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a funny story that one time they'd been on the stand for about 32 hours. And Ray Charles was going to come on the telethon and do, and this, I don't care. 32 hours is a long time.
Yeah.
And, they have the breaks. And Ray Charles comes on and he says, okay, he says, I want to rehearse the band on the break.
Mm.
And the band is like dragging. So they go back and they're a little bugged. Tried to tell him, Mr. Charles, they want this band can play it. No, I want to hear it.
Mm.
So started rehearsing the band, and Rick just said, hey guys, let's just take the trumpet parts down an octave
Mm.
for the rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
He kicked that off, and it was a big band thing, and he's playing down an octave. Hold on here. Ray Charles says, trumpets. He says, what are you guys doing back there? And Rick says, well, Mr. Charles, we've been playing a lot, and we're just saving ourselves for when we do the performance. And he says, no, he says, let me hear that now, right now. I want to hear the trumpets as they're written.
Mm.
And Rick says, you can either hear it here on the rehearsal or out there on the show. Sort of like giving him an ultimatum.
Yeah.
Trumpet man, what's your name? Gary Grant. So, that's what he said. And funny
Yeah.
line, he's quick on his feet.
Yeah.
And,
Threw you under the
and
bus. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh,
I wasn't, yeah.
so okay, I was joking about Jerry Lewis, but of course Jerry Hay is who you're talking about, and it sounds
Yeah.
like you've been lifelong friends and colleagues. But tell me about where you guys met, how that came about.
I met Jerry in Hawaii. I went over there to play first trumpet for Diane Ross and the Temptations. And uh, yeah, so I met Jerry. He was playing the guy by the name of Dick Jensen,
Mm-hmm.
and he was doing that show. And they had this vamp at the end of the show. It was a Sunday night, and he was playing the vamp up to double C's at the end of 13 shows that week, and
Mm-hmm.
just nailing it. And I met him after the show and everything. What size mouthpiece you play? And he says, a 1.5 C Bach. And I said, Lord of mercy. And that
Wow.
was my first experience with Jerry, and we became fast friends and
Mm-hmm.
played together. And I studied with the Bill Adams routine with him.
Mm-hmm.
They taught me, him and Larry Hall, both
Mm-hmm.
showed me all the routine and stuff, and we went at it. We played shows over there mostly, no recording, just live shows,
Mm-hmm.
and Chuck Finley would come over, Ollie Mitchell, other musicians,
Mm-hmm.
and Steely Dan would come over, and I think he lived there, but on
What
Maui,
was the name of
but
Jerry's band?
Seawind,
Seawind. Thank you. I skipped my
yes.
mind. So were you starting to play with that group?
Yes, we formed it was 11-piece group originally.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next concert, I think it went down to 9, and then it just kept going to 7 pieces. And I think that's where they ended up. See, was Larry Williams on keyboards and played sax, and Kim Uscroft, Kim Wild, Bob Wilson, Pauline, and Jerry. And yeah, six people.
Mm,
So, and Kim Wow, 7. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So, um, yeah. So,
So as far as,
I did all
sorry, go
those.
ahead.
I
Go ahead.
did all those. I did all those recordings. Yeah, with
Mm-hmm.
the group,
Mm-hmm.
and they were um, uh, very, very musical. Had a big following. It was great.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, the opened a lot of doors, but you've already made a name for yourself before you've headed to Hawaii. I mean, you're not going to get on Diana Ross, her band, without having proved yourself somewhere before.
That's correct, and that's the way it is. That's the way it used to be. Is that you during the late '60s and the early '70s, uh, and this was the early '70s, that you there was so much going on with live groups, live bands, things that Edgar Winter, and then you had your symphonies, and you had the uh, uh, you had the ice capades, and you had this and that, and you had all these shows and stuff going on, and those were uh, it was a lot of not shortage of horn players. You had
Mm-hmm.
Stan Kenton's band, you had Woody Herman's band, you had Buddy Rich's big band, you had Count Basie, you had Duke Ellington, you had all those big bands, and they were uh, pretty set, but some of them changed over. Woody's band changed over quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I recorded "Light My Fire" with Woody in 1968, and that was the biggest record he did since he did Woodchopper's Ball in
Mm-hmm.
1947. So that
Wow.
re-established him, and I've been fortunate to be a part of people's records where they did a surgency in their sales and their popularity from those records.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it wasn't so much me. It was just wasn't me at all. It was the timing and the
Mm-hmm.
writers and the composers, the tunes, and the timing of things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, those all disappeared with the computer coming out and the synth horns and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And uh, if you know, uh, in the late '80s, '90s, early '90s, guys were talking about. I mean, they had actually a disc they were selling called the Jerry Hay Horns, and Jerry sent a letter. His lawyer sent a letter that you don't have permission to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to pull that off your library immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. And we got offers to go in and record the horn section because we had a sound nobody else had.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky that Jerry and I hooked up, and with Chuck Finley too. And this was just a particular sound we generated that
Mm-hmm.
um, we didn't want. It it wasn't so much the sound of the horns. I mean, the guy could get it on a record if he played the right kind of horn line and have the Jerry A horns, and he could sell it.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't that what that magic of the performance, the air, the intent, and the
Yeah.
writing from the genius of Jerry Hay is
Mm-hmm.
what was intriguing about us.
Um, was it always the lead chair, or did you ever sit in the jazz chair with any of those bands?
I did um, no, mostly in the lead book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I did play jazz. I wasn't. I love jazz, man, but it's a dedication that is sort of like my classical playing. It's pretty good at times,
Mm-hmm.
but it's you know it's another kind of dedication of you know that usually classical players
Mm-hmm.
it's not always usually they don't cross over very well
Mm-hmm.
into a swing or a jazz idiom for the most part, and that rule's been broken too.
Well,
Alan
Winton
Vasuti's
was a great example of that.
Winton is a marvelous
Yeah,
example of that.
yeah.
My Lord of mercy, and Alan Fazzuti also.
Oh, yeah.
You, you know, the fire dance he did back in the late '70s and the '80s was just ridiculous, and
Yeah.
he's done it. He's done it all. However, you have your Michael Sachs that doesn't reach over, and what a player, man! What a monster,
Yeah.
and all the uh, so it's sort of like um, doing a dance and studying the instrument as legitimately as you can
Mm-hmm.
with production of sound and being able to create beauty with it, and not only on your attacks but the releases, not sagging and doing all those things that make it sound ugly,
Mm-hmm.
and and like where sound isn't uh, uh, you know guys would tell me sound is way overrated,
Mm.
and and to me it's the invite that is real important for me. To other
Mm-hmm.
people it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
It's what comes from their heart always, with me too, but also too I love the great sound of the horn, you
Mm-hmm.
know uh, when they came out with the lo-fi records, I was going, I beg your pardon, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
lo-fi. What is that, Larry?
It's cheap. It's
Yeah,
cheaping out. Yeah.
it's sort of like degrades all the standard, I would guess, of the, being dedicated to music is a lifetime endeavor. There's always something to learn on it. It's not to say that a guy that has his heart into it and can control the instrument somewhat can't project an
Mm-hmm.
emotional reaction from a listener as much as I can with a great sound.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, let me preface that, but it's, you know, it's not something that I'm going to cross the street and go listen to. Let me get over there and hear that. Boy, I'm going to hear this guy just crack all these notes. And whereas it took me really years of listening to Miles and and that to understand where he was coming from and how a marvelous trumpet player he is.
Mm-hmm.
He was so in depth with his harmonic and his growth. Uh, you know, it's just like his timing and his feel, just marvelous. And
Well, to
I
think that
think
sound is overrated or sound is not as important. I mean, take somebody like Sergei and all the technique that he has. If he didn't have the sound to go with it, who would listen to it,
yeah, exactly,
right? I mean,
yeah,
the sound
exactly.
is key.
And it's our speaker, and I think it is the key. Is especially for learned, studied musicians.
Mm-hmm.
James Morrison is another example of somebody that doesn't practice. He doesn't practice the horn.
Yeah, I hate that. It's not fair, is it?
What a marvelous guy, to
Yeah,
be able to do
yeah.
that. So, whenever I give my perception, it's important that I don't, my angle or outlook on it doesn't uh, limit
Hmm.
other people that would wish to do the same thing.
Hmm. Hey, let's shift over to recording studio for a minute. I've had the good fortune to talk to Malcolm, of course, Wayne Bergeron, Bobby, um, and who else? Well, of course, you, and gotten some good perspective on recording studio. But it sounds like it was the most non-competitive situation. It sounded like everybody was just completely supportive of everybody else, and to me that was a very interesting uh, perspective to hear because you think how competitive it is to get into that scene in the first place. But it seemed like once you ran, people were talking about Yuan Racy and what a gem of a person he was, and
They would say that before they would describe this beautiful trumpet playing.
yeah.
Man, he did things that are world class classical recordings. Not
Hmm.
only with Billy May and all that stuff that he did in that era, but being first trumpet player. The first thing they would say about him is what a marvelous person he is. First thing,
That's the kind of the best legacy, isn't it?
it's the very best. Yeah,
Hmm.
it really is
Hmm.
because it's how you touch people. There was other guys that came along. One comes to mind of Paul Hubenon. He was from I think Philadelphia or he was Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and he recorded with the Cleveland Orchestra when he was 15 years old, and went in the Elmer Note, came out here, and he just wanted to be at the top, and just couldn't get knock off Chuck Finley. He was Chuck was all over the place, and he just didn't mean but boom when he played. Paul would never miss anything, but he had issues with his personality of dominating people and sort of giving you that look down, things like that.
Sure.
That doesn't work out in the end. Good, it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he died. He died at 34 years old.
Mm.
He had, uh, yeah. So, um, you know, marvelous player, man. I worked with Paul, and
Hmm.
he was really, really good, really good.
Malcolm
And
shared. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
go ahead, you go
Well, I
ahead.
was
I'm
going
done.
to say Malcolm shared, that you guys would get into the studio. You would know everybody's strengths. Who's got the lyrical chops, who's got the uh, whatever, and that it'd be like, okay, you play this. Uh, Again, it seems like, well, that's the best way to do it, right? Because it's going to work.
You
So the
have to
question
be.
is what was your strength, or what is your strength? Were you the lyrical player? I know you can play the high stuff, but
I can play lyrical stuff. I can play uh, all the registers. Uh, uh, the the issues with in recording is that we manipulated the industry to pay the first trumpet player extra money. So as you deal with this imagery of, oh, get Gary Grant, he's the best man. He does this, does that, he's done this and does well. Uh, that so that imagery of and they've got slogans like you're only as good as your last note. You know, I did name that tune for 3 years, and
Hmm.
it was a thread on that show. If you miss a melody, your career was done.
Wow.
So, because it was all live, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so as a first trumpet player, if I'm in there and I've got uh, a solo and I have Malcolm sitting there, or I have a John Lewis, and I've seen Malcolm where guys would ask him to play something and they weren't really nice to him, he'd say, "No, you got it." So it can work against you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Malcolm used to tell me I was the only first trumpet player that he would work with that where he would play other than first trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, he was taking less money,
Mm-hmm.
and I was getting the more money, and that was because of our camaraderie
Mm-hmm.
and uh, because when I produced him, I also engineered, and uh, he wouldn't want me to. Oh, Malcolm, I just lost those last 100 bars, man. I'm sorry. No. So there's a way that you show your appreciation for guys that do help you when you're. Uh, a lot of times when we did the Jerry stuff, everybody was making the same money,
Mm-hmm.
which was good. We were best with the best artists, the best producers, the best engineers, and the best money.
Mm-hmm.
Not that everybody else didn't get good money at times, but we got it all the time with him.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry saw to that in a nice way, and yet we never went for the money. It was always there. It was a rate, and boom, no problem. So and in that sense, of course, that changed when the synth horns came out and all that stuff with that demand. And yet we still did a lot of stuff. I did a lot of movies and recordings with Aaron Zigman, and he's composed around, I don't know, 80, 90 movies or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and done a lot of stuff. And Alan Silvestri, I did 65 with him, did all the Back to the Futures and some other just marvelous soundtracks, and with the orchestra. And then with Jerry, it was always when we played those dates, uh, Jerry played second, and Larry Hall played third, and I got the first trumpet playing money.
Mm-hmm.
And they never ever said, "Well, you get the big bucks," and and I was like, I would always confer with Jerry, always in the section when we talked about the music or how we were going to do it and what's the approach of it, and yeah. So yeah, the camaraderie is really really good, and it's about really. Uh, Malcolm would never say anything. He would never say anything because he didn't want to draw attention to himself.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to just come in and blister it down. And when he left, and the composers now they're mixing,
Mm-hmm.
they're going in. You got mixing going, the engineers going, and all this stuff. Big, big, big movies, and they listen to him playing, and it's just like, whoa, that's just marvelous. And
Yeah.
usually it was never close field mics. It was the tree, which was
Mm.
3 mics in the studio, and his performance was, it has such a beautiful sound.
Yeah.
Lord of mercy.
Yeah.
And accurate, and I think when he did Star Trek, the TV show,
Mm-hmm.
I think he did the solo on that, and he was down to his. They were doing little, to take out the flute and bar, 42 or whatever. doing all those changes, and he played the solo 14 or 15 times before he had a little blemish,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and where the string section stood up and applauded when he
Yeah.
did make a mistake because he was so good, you
Yeah.
know. It
Yeah.
was so beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, I thought that was a big part of the community in LA. It was a bunch of nice people, and and not nice in the sense of it wasn't a high standard. It was serious high standards,
Yeah.
you know, and,
Yeah.
but nice to work with. And we all realized that we sort of shine as a group, or we go down in flames as a group, you know.
Okay, so that begs the question then. um, there were all successes, right? I mean, there had to be times when the producer or the composer just could not be satisfied, right? Was never happy with anything.
Yeah. Yes. There was there was a couple of instances where uh, the was doing Mission Impossible with what's his name? I forget the producer of it. Anyway,
Lalo, that's not Lalo Schifrin, is it?
no, no,
Oh
no,
no,
no.
you're thinking producer.
This is this well, this is the later one that Alan Silvestri did,
Mm-hmm.
and they had this scene going through a tunnel. A train's going through a tunnel, and God, the producer, big time producer, when he said spit, you say how far, you know, that kind of producer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, so anyway, he told Alan, Alan says, look, this is developed like this, and and I've incorporated the the Mission Impossible theme and this action part of the movie and stuff, and boom. And he says, I tell you what, Alan, he says, go back out there and record it the way you want to record it. And he says, then go home tonight and rewrite it, and let's record it the way I want to hear it tomorrow morning. Yeah. So, as far as composers, working on composers, yeah, there was guys that were uh, not very nice, and uh, I didn't concern myself with them. They had sort of an issue with their self importance, and uh, would never um, compliment you on being accurate, being there. And if something went bad after, you know, you're sitting in an air conditioned studio, big sound stage, and you sit there and your horn is cold. Okay, now let's burn. And that's not always that easy. I mean, you can
Mm-hmm.
blow to your horn and keep your, you know, do some things like that, but it's still demanding, and a lot of circumstances, and things happen. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
we're not machines, we're not robots. So
Right.
and then when those composers, James Horner is a composer I'm thinking about. I
Mm-hmm.
refrain from bless his heart, he's not here anymore.
Right.
And he's Warren Looning was doing. It was after Rocketeer, this movie, and it was like the trumpet part,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like over and over for about, I don't know, 16 bars, intergalactic skips and stuff, and Warren never missed it, and he finally chipped it, and James, trumpet, what's that? Check your note, and boy, first time he's clammed it, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he yelled out it. That's the first time I've missed it, James. You know,
Yeah.
he was gone after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So you find those circumstances, and yeah, not too much though.
Hmm.
And then after the Titanic, that movie, James Horner became so wealthy. He became a nice guy, man. It's unbelievable. He became a real nice guy, man.
You know,
And
I've had the good fortune. The only composer I've been able to talk to is Bruce Broughton, and
mm,
what a nice guy. I mean, it's just it was immediate uh, camaraderie. You know, the conversation was easy, uh, super easy to talk to, and very complimentary of all the people that he worked with. But um, and I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus, you know, names. I'm not into doing that sort of thing. In fact,
and
talking about that, after I interviewed uh, Malcolm, and Malcolm didn't really throw anybody under the bus, but he kept contacting me. He goes, Larry, you got to go back and you got to take this story out. And this story, I said, Malcolm, don't worry, you know, you didn't. But he was really concerned. Uh, you know, he didn't want to offend anybody. And I appreciate that. You know, it's like you don't need that in the industry, right? You don't need to take anybody down because it seems like they do it themselves, right?
they do it themselves. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah.
And it doesn't serve any purposes out there because what goes around comes around. And, uh, we're all trying to, play music.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it becomes another issue. You don't sleep. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
you're nervous, and it can just cascade into a different thing. I've seen him fold. I've
Yeah.
seen first trumpet players, good ones. I can't do it. I cannot do
Wow.
it, Gary.
Wow.
And and yeah, and the guys that were really good and almost gonna make enough jobs so they could actually have a living in the recording industry
Hmm.
just quit and leave. A lot of those over the years because uh, and we were sort of uh, we didn't concern ourselves with the other trumpet players in town. Somebody calls you up and they say, "Hey, man, I'd really like to have you on this record and being bit of bop," and you go, okay, and you don't concern yourself if that's competition. I don't think it is. I think
Hmm.
it's value for what you can do,
Yeah.
and and not so much concerned about if the next guy, this other guy, you can recommend him, and I've helped guys a lot of like that, and I would never if somebody did, going back to that question of if somebody, I was playing first and somebody else did something, played it where I didn't play it, I always let the composer know. I always let the contractor know and gave them their kudos for that. I did not take their artistry
Mm.
and say, yeah, I did that. Only once I did that. Wait a minute. I was doing comedy relief and Doc Severinsen. Pennies from Heaven.
Mm. Hmm.
Up to high F's and high G's, and they wanted to use his recording of it.
Hmm.
And and I remember the band, just make like you're playing it. I says,
Oh
you
no.
bet, you bet. So I just mimicked I was playing it, and I was thinking about,
Yeah.
boy, people are going to think I'm playing that. Boy, it sounded beautiful, man. I'll
Yeah.
never forget it because it was a live performance,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, it was this
Yeah.
feature of Doc. But most of the time, I always gave those kudos to my fellow people, and
Hmm.
and always, always tried to do that, and uh, championed the artists, the performers, the people playing the music, and the composers, but more so on the performance side because that's where
Mhm.
I came from. And without it being absurd, but
Yeah.
always leaned on that area of appreciation.
Along that line, I remember when I talked to Rick Baptist about this. Of course, the finally getting the musicians' names in the credits, everybody who's on the score, that's huge, right? I mean, and now sometimes these credits go by so fast. There's, and the print is so small, but still, the fact that they finally start to recognize uh, the musicians, I think, that's a huge step forward.
Um, yeah, I think so. We just they never cared about that too much. They try. The industry always tries to downplay what your importance is
Hmm.
as a musician. They've always done that to the artist, and um, it's a ploy of theirs. Just let's keep them down there, the
Hmm.
little people down there,
Hmm.
even though you're a big. Uh, I did the Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston.
Hmm.
Did all those recordings with Whitney with David Foster,
Hmm.
producer, and
Hmm.
did and just uh, they had they could take it and do what they wanted to with it, and it wasn't. Once the record sold 38 million, and that's a lot of records for a
That's a lot.
CD. And I called up the record label, and they asked them for a gold record, which I never asked for. This is the only, well, that I did another time too. But I asked for a gold record because I was a soloist on the main title on that, and it was on the record. And the record label told me that they didn't have budget to give out any gold records anymore. That they were having their company party, and they were giving chocolate records to the people that work at the company, but they didn't have wasn't enough money to do.
Wow.
So you sort of deal with that kind of
Yeah.
um, ploy, I'll
You
call it.
mentioned Doc a few minutes ago. Did you ever get to sit in on the Tonight Show band?
I did not.
Oh.
I played there with other bands. Uh, Usually, it was Johnny Dean on Snooky Young, and and Chuck did it for years. And I did a record date once where I was playing first and Johnny Dean was playing second. I did a lot of dates with other kind of calls with Johnny Dino and
Hmm.
Snooky. And but there was Johnny Dino, Snooky Young, and Yuan Racy in the section.
Hmm.
And then here's Gary, and they said, "Sit down there, young fella." I said, "Well, wait a minute. No, 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 no. Your turn. Come on, let's do it." And it was a lot of fun, man.
Tell
And
me a little bit about Snooky.
Snooky was uh, one of the most. I mean, when Larry, as you know, with your extensive knowledge of trumpet players in the world,
Not sure how
yeah,
extensive, but
well, we all do. We know the greats, and he was one of them, man. When he
hmm.
was in the 30s, was with Jimmy Lunsford's band, which was hot band in New York, big band and stuff. And and he did all those years with Basie, and did he could swing. He had chops.
Hmm.
He was. Uh, they have. Uh, yeah. This is Sweets Edison. He was
Hmm.
another one that wasn't very classical trained, you know,
Hmm.
and I guess he had a thing on a call over Universal where he was supposed to go or something like that
Hmm.
with the
Hmm.
triple tongue, and he was going you know, with his vowels, and the composer stopped the music and said, "You're kidding me, aren't you?" And he says, "No, that's it."
Yeah. Yeah, Bobby Shue
Yeah,
told me a story very similar to that. Bobby said, "I've never learned a double tongue." Yeah,
I think Bobby was there too. Yeah,
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's the same story. Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, you know, we all wish we could play as beautifully as Bobby C. So, you
Yeah.
know, but Snooky was, yeah, Snooky was one of a kind, man. He was a very, very nice man. Didn't do drugs, didn't drink, you know, just took care of business.
Yeah.
And always a good thought, good remarks, and his playing just spoke for itself.
Hmm. You look at the well, and were both Candoli brothers part of that band at one time?
I don't think Pete was, but
Yeah,
Conti
Conti.
was.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Count was, yeah, he was another. You know, anytime, actually, at one time, I thought when Jerry and I were in our heyday, hey, Jerry, heyday, we, I actually thought that because our timing, we're doing this stuff with Quincy and doing these records with him, with George Duke, and a lot of great artists,
Hmm.
records and stuff, that we were the new sound. And a lot of that was true, and that
Hmm.
we are the extension of those other guys, and sort of had my nose was up in the air just a little bit. This is me personally. I never
Hmm.
did it, never portrayed that, never tried to,
Hmm. Hmm.
ever, never did. No, 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 no. But inside my mind, I'm saying, boy, we're doing really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I made that full circle, and I said, no, 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 absolutely not. These guys were as much of a musician as I ever wanted to be. They carried the torch big time.
Hmm.
And I think that's been in our whole history of guys that have a passion for music and dedication to performing and playing with others. I think it's just our history is in depth.
Yeah.
I don't care about the high notes. I've recorded up to E flat above double C. I've That's high enough, and I know those high. You know, Malcolm did this on the Tchaikovsky. He did this cadenza where he went 5 different octaves, and he played this line up live. Me recording him, just me and him, and he played up to double C, all the way down to to contra
Mm.
pedal C, and it sounded beautiful. And I looked at
Yeah.
Malcolm. Malcolm, I says, uh, one more. And he looked at me and he says, "What was wrong with that?" I says, "Nothing. I just want to hear you do it
Yeah.
again."
So yeah, actually,
Uh,
I was just getting ready to ask you about that. So when Malcolm comes to you and says, "Hey, Gary, I want to record the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto," I mean, were you like, "Are you nuts?"
I'd heard him do it as a demo, and it was pretty dang good little demo. It was with
Mm.
a piano and who somebody that did the adaptation of it for piano. They have a yeah. Anyway. He went and recorded that, and I said, I think we can pull it off. Uh, to record it is there was financial concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't a record label uh, at that time. The money wasn't there on a lot of classical projects, especially the Tchaikovsky Ballet
Mm.
Concerto.
Right.
And, and yeah, so I did, and I knew he could play it. He was another virtuoso at a very young age,
Mm-hmm.
and he could do all that stuff. He studied with Vacchiano. He had in New York, and he could did all the transpositions and to E flat and D and C and also he had could do the multiple tonguings of double tongue to triple tongue and switch back and forth, and it was fluid for him because
Mm-hmm.
he learned that as a young age. So technically, you know, he was frightening what he could
Mm-hmm.
pull off
Mm-hmm.
technically. Yeah. So I I had an extensive string library, and I did a mock-up of the Tchaikovsky violin concerto with about three different string sections, and I did the down bows and the up bows, and yeah, I mean, I really did it where it
Mm-hmm.
sounded pretty dang good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, really good because I spent so much. I spent a month on it, and I took it in and for him to record that was going to be with a live orchestra and uh, was going to be around $165,000 at at a low budget because this wasn't, he wasn't part of an orchestra that was already set
Mm-hmm.
up. This would be hiring guys 3 hour calls. So I have that on figure. So we figured a way to do it where it
Mm-hmm.
was with the combination of those strings and bringing other people on the arrangement. So it we used a like a chamber orchestra with it, small
Mm-hmm.
that and the musicians are so good in LA they could play to the pre-record and get it
Mm-hmm.
and nail it.
Yeah.
So and then Malcolm and I went at it. We would record, maybe Monday and Wednesday, and then he was busy, and we get back together on Sunday, and you don't have a flow, a daily flow going at it, and it makes it extremely difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and it's already difficult to begin with. So,
Yep.
you know, it, we just took our time, didn't worry about it. When he had to work, I had to work. We went and worked, and then we meet at the pass and go at it again.
So being a producer, and you mentioned being an engineer too, but being a producer, there's a lot of trust, right? When somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Gary, I want you to produce my album," right? Because you're going to have to be honest with them in the booth, right? You're going to and but they have to trust that you're not just going to be a yes, that sounded great. Yes, that sounded great. Let's go on.
I would, what I would do if something was, uh, like with Arturo. Arturo just wanted to go straight ahead and thank you very much at the end of the day, and he would play something comes to mind. He was doing this feature and it was just beautifully done, played. And he got to this three bars that was funky. Ended up on low D, and it was didn't have a slide out. There was a little, eyebrow raising, and wasn't a good sound. Just sort of like this guy off kilter at
Mm-hmm.
those three bars, and went on finished the tune, and I say to Arturo, I says, Arturo, I says, listen to your sound in here. And I says, it's so beautiful. And I says, when you get to these particular bars, I says, your sound changes and the pitch is not good. I says, I know you don't like to punch. You listen to it and you tell me, I says, it's an easy punch. It's easy. And why keep it there unless you want to keep it there?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you just want to say, you want to be bullheaded and say, well, yeah, this is going to sound funky forever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say that to him. I would let him listen to it. And he says, oh, yeah, let's get that. Piece of cake. So
Yeah.
you include the artists in what you're trying to do as a producer and get the best out of them and sort of make it their idea. And, and it keeps the legal, it keeps the, uh, keeps the ego out of
Yeah.
the mix.
Yeah. Um, who am I trying to think of? Al Hurt, not Al Hurt, Herb Alpert. Herb Alpert. Sorry. Of course, he's a solo artist. I'm just curious if you ever got a chance to work with him.
Yes, I did. And
Mm-hmm.
I did played several records with him. The latest one I did was a Christmas record, and he sounded really good on it, man. He did. Uh, it's just his performance, everything on it was really stellar. And we did it over an A&M Records, and that was maybe 3 years ago, something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living out here when I went and drove in and did that with him,
Mm-hmm.
and some other records I did with him.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, he's got his own uniqueness of music and sound that
Mm-hmm.
is, what can you say? Uh, Kenny G was a saxophonist that was poo-pooed by a lot of saxophone players,
Sure.
but and his the way he went about it, and they knew too much about him, and that he would almost write out his solos or whatever, and he had a good sound. He could play in tune,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's a careful place to be in, to be where you want to down anytime somebody uh, says something bad about another musician is that they want to elevate themselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's and so you just take it with a grain of salt. Again,
Mm-hmm.
Herb Alpert, A Taste of Honey went through the roof, and when he started out, and it was a kind man, a gentle man, lovely person,
Mm-hmm.
and he found a niche. And music to me is different strokes for different folks. What would the scene now is what has been the mass of young kids have been subject to, that they really don't know who the masters are, who
Mm-hmm.
the classics are, and so they're not a little, they're ignorant and what that scope is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a confining scope if you're just listening to low end kick. Uh, it's and a bunch of words going down, you're sort of going into their life, and so it's just it's the depth of the music, and there's a lot of it, man. I mean, Woody Shaw, forget about it with that guy,
Mm-hmm.
and Freddie Hubbard, forget about it. You're up there, don't even bring your horn on stage with those guys. Leave it in the case and
Yeah.
enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Hey, this has been a lot of fun.
Let me tell you, I don't get these calls.
Oh, well, what timing on that? Obviously, that's the most ironic thing. Hopefully, he's going to check back in here. Oh, here he is. Here he is.
Sorry about that. You know, my iPad died, and
I
then I
wondered.
went to my other iPad, and it's got Chrome set up, and yeah, Zoom doesn't work with Chrome.
So, the ironic thing is you were saying I don't often get calls like this, and that's where you disappeared. And I thought that was brilliant timing.
Yeah, it, yeah. I don't do a lot of interviews, and so it's just that's the way it works out, which is okay with me too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and I really appreciate this moment to for us to be for you asking me these questions like my life matters,
It absolutely
and
does.
yeah, just if I can help anybody with this the old stories or whatever. It's
Hmm.
changed so much now. It's not really uh, applicable anymore. Unless you are in the studios or uh, you know, I have. Um, I guess we have merits about what we've done and what we've accomplished in this
Hmm.
life, and but I'm so excited about this new record I'm doing that I don't even have a name for yet. Um, is just keep moving on, and
Yeah.
playing the best I can,
So you have an idea for when that's going to be finished and released?
Uh, well, I have three more tunes ready to go that I haven't recorded yet, so that
Hmm.
would bring it up to 14. And uh, just uh, when I say okay, we got some there that my sister is a bassoonist down in Panama City, Florida,
Hmm.
and she plays in string quartets, string wind ensembles. She plays in the Panama Panama City Orchestra, and did a lot of the all that area around the
Hmm.
Panhandle
Hmm.
with those orchestras and stuff. A lot of the musicians come over from Tallahassee, from the school there, and play, and there's good quality musicians there.
Hmm.
And she is an accomplished bassoonist and flute player, flutist. She does
Hmm.
that too, and she also plays piano and teaches kids, and does accompaniments for them and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
so she's not in the same bag I'm into. And I sent her a couple of tunes. She's been asking for them because I tell her about it, and she just totally raved about how
Hmm.
good it was. So that's the object is that we just want to get the love back from people to appreciate our creativity,
Yeah.
and that's the name of the game there. So of course it's my
Yeah.
sister. I couldn't go wrong. I felt pretty safe sending it to her.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I do want to wrap up, but I do want to say you said like it mattered, and I will say this: it absolutely matters. I think um, everybody I talk to, uh, in some way, they've set the bar really high, and to think about the recording scene and even the live music scene, you guys. Uh, well, and you even referred to the masters, right? You guys are the masters. You're the ones who set those bars and I think raise the level for everybody. So thank you for all that, and for all those movies that you played on that nobody knows that it was you. It'd be nice to know they could figure that out. But Gary, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate your time.
Oh man, it's been just terrific. Listening and having me on your show, Larry.
Everybody, thanks to Gary. Appreciate you guys being here to listen. Gary, by the way, this is going to live on YouTube and on the audio is going to live on SoundCloud through the audio podcast. Again, thank you, Gary, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.